Hello and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul and I'm here with my wonderful co-host Dotsie Bausch, who keeps making me laugh.
See? We're already having fun before we even came on air today.
Did you ever have the giggles when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, I have now all the time, especially hanging out with you.
Okay, so we're going to get serious.
Okay. This is a serious combo we're going to have.
But you know, one of the reasons that we do this is because, well, I know that I do this podcast with you is because I enjoy you so much. But I also am so impressed with you, and you do so much amazing things for the cause. And you're working on something now about our dietary guidelines, and we need the audience's help. We need your help, folks.
We do. It's not me. It's just it's everybody that has an immense passion just like you that's on the team that's just fighting for the rights, right? Of just all the lovely species that we share this place with.
Yeah.
And so we have an incredible opportunity right now in front of us, folks. In this period of time between now, when you're listening to this, and May, our national dietary guidelines are being reviewed by the committee, the USDA and the Dietary Guidelines of America. They review them every 5 years. And so they did a long review period last year. If you remember, I went and spoke in Washington, D.C., and then they're going to make the recommendations at the end of this year. We are asking for dairy to be removed as a food group from the dietary guidelines for Americans. 65% of the global population is lactose intolerant. It is a grave injustice that dairy is being pushed on any people, but especially people of color, where up to 95% of individuals are lactose intolerant. And the symptoms are pretty severe, right? From not being able to breathe, as being asthmatic, skin conditions like psoriasis and eczema, constipation, bloating. I mean, they're pretty severe, and especially pushing this on our children. Right? Yeah. So we can take action, and you actually don't have to be American to take action. Everybody in the world that's listening to this can take action. So we are wanting to absolutely flood the commentary section of the USDA. They are taking public commentary for what you feel like you want to change on the dietary guidelines. And so if you go to switchforgood.org, a pop-up is going to come up as the second you go there, within 2 or 3 seconds. You're just going to click on that to take action. It's going to take you right to the public commentary section. We have a couple of pre-written comments that you can just submit. You'd enter your name and who you are, or even more awesomely, you could write something yourself, why you want dairy removed. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be a couple of sentences. They only have about 40 or 1,000 comments right now. We want to flood them with 100,000 comments about this very serious issue of removing dairy as a food group for humans. And we are following in the footsteps of our neighbors to the north, because Canada last year removed dairy as a food group for humans. So no longer there. This would have
such an impact, because that darn food plate has that glass of milk on it, and we could have that removed, and it would really make a difference, I think, in terms of how people view what is a healthy diet.
Completely, because people listen to it, and we're on our way there, because the last 5 years they took dairy from being inside the plate to a side dish.
Oh,
so we're on our way off the page, right? We're
good,
and then we'll just no longer. We don't need the breast milk from another species.
That's
period.
right, exactly. Yeah. So, folks, write in, please, and let us know you did.
Yes, thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, everybody that's listening to this can take action, and we think it's probably about 2.5 minutes of your life, and it's powerful, and we need you, and
it makes a difference.
Go do it.
They listen. They will listen to the citizens of what the citizens want. So I want to introduce our guest today, who, if you weren't going to sign up, you will after and write a letter. You'll probably be more impassioned after to write a letter to the USDA taking dairy off our plates. Jessica Strathdee is from New Zealand, and she didn't consider herself an animal lover until she worked on a dairy farm. After 4 years, she couldn't take it any longer, because the reality of what we put cows through to get milk on the shelves sent her into a deep depression. And at the risk of leaving her life partner, she decided to move on. Happily, her partner had also been gravely affected by the work. Well, not happily, actually, that he'd been gravely affected, but happily, he was also agreeing with her about what she was feeling. And together they left with a vow to become a vegan family. Jessica took it 10 steps farther by launching the New Zealand branch of Mothers Against Dairy. And we're curious to learn more about her story because both Dotsie and I have heard her speak, and she has a lot to say. So thank you, Jessica, for being here all the way from New Zealand.
No problem. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit. We don't get a lot of people who were farm employees on our show. You were a dairy drinker and a meat eater at the time. Tell us about the Jessica back then.
That was a 600 head herd, so not quite that many cows, but in New Zealand that's considered a pretty medium-sized farm. And the reason that my partner and I decided to move, because we actually moved from a different region to work in the intensive dairy industry in Canterbury, New Zealand, is because we decided that we just wanted to get away from the grind of the 9-to-5 city life. And we thought we were going to move to the country and have a beautiful country existence and be at one with nature and the animals. And we sort of had all these ideas around what country life was going to be like. And in New Zealand, the dairy industry has been heralded as sort of the backbone of the country. So we sort of felt that we were going to do some quite important work. And we were going to see more of each other. We were going to start a family. We weren't going to be stuck in traffic anymore. Just all these ideas around what dairy farm life was going to be, because it's often presented to us as mum, dad, and the 2 kids having a great life out on the farm. And I think that's what we just expected we were going to go into. Yeah,
but it didn't turn out that way. No. Right? It wasn't as idyllic.
No.
What were you expecting? Like, what were you, where did you expect the cows to be? Did you have any sense of that if all of the milk was to be sold to human beings and for the farm itself to turn a profit, that maybe the babies weren't drinking the milk? Or what was your idea in your head of what you were going to enter on day one of your job?
I think that this is very embarrassing to say, but I do think it's indicative of just the general public. That thought didn't even enter my head. I literally just thought that cows produce milk because it's what they do. And I guess if I had logically thought about it, I would have thought they needed a baby to make that milk. But I wasn't even making those connections in my mind when I was thinking about working on a dairy farm. I think I also moved there thinking that the animals were very much part of the system, that it was like a mutual, like beneficial thing for both parties, both humans and cows. I sort of, the things that you read when you're a child and you read in the storybooks about cows lining up to be milked, and I knew it wasn't like the cute milkmaid in the pail or anything like that, but I guess I expected it to be a much more reciprocal arrangement, I think, and I hadn't even thought about the babies, to be honest. And when we arrived, there were no babies on the farm because it was sort of the end of season. So calving season didn't start for another 4 or 5 months after we arrived.
So, you know, by the way, Jessica, I too did not put this very simple, basic fact together when I was drinking milk that a cow, I think I knew the cow needed to be pregnant, but I thought she just needed to be pregnant once, and then you kept basically using her milk and that she never would run out. I did not realize that you needed to impregnate a cow every 10 months, every year or so to continue getting milk from her. So, and I'm sure we're not alone, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we were just
I
raised
think that
not
is
to
the general public. We're not thinking that deeply into it when we pick up that bottle of milk off the shelf. We're literally not thinking about this as food for an infant. We're just thinking this is just for my coffee or my cereal. We're just not thinking about it very deeply. I mean, I was on the farm taking the milk from the cows, still not putting that together. And it wasn't until calving season started that just this light bulb went off about the reality of what it took to get that milk. So I had to go and see it for myself. I think even if people had told me on the street, I don't know how deeply that would have affected me. I think I would have been like, oh, okay, but just not really processed it until I actually had to eyeball those babies in the calf pens.
So let's just go before calving season. You said you had 4 or 5 months that you worked before calving season start. What was that experience like? Just milking, right? They're just still milking from the previous birth.
And at the end of season, their sort of their volume is lowering, so the milking is quick, relatively quick compared to the beginning of calving season when they've got a lot of milk and it can take a lot longer. So it was only a couple of hours, and I was going to the milking shed. I was just a relief milker. My partner was the 2IC on the farm, and I was relief milking. And
I'm sorry, I don't know what either one of those things mean.
Tell us.
Okay.
You were
You have to help us out.
Tell us what a relief milker is, and also your partner's job.
Yeah, so my partner was second in charge, just under the manager.
Got it.
And so he was doing very much the 11 days on, 3 days off, the very full-on work starting at 4:30 in the morning. But I was just coming in and milking when they needed someone because staff were low or people's days off. So I wasn't employed to be doing it like on a regular full-time basis. I was just coming in and filling the gaps where people were needed. And often at that time, at the end of the really busy season, people are wanting to take a bit of time off. So I was going in and doing like a few weeks here, a few weeks there. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about, so you went in, you were a relief milker and you went into the barns.
Yeah. So at first, I actually felt it's bizarre talking about this now because I've got such a different sort of frame of mind around it. But at first I was proud of the work because it's a place where women often aren't seen. And I felt quite a feminist going in there and doing, because it's quite hard work. It's very messy work because cows, when they're afraid, they defecate a lot. So because I was cupping off and they then have to get off the platform, which is something which is really hard for them to do backwards while the platform is going.
Oh my gosh.
So I just want to give, because you said cupping off and you talked about the platform. I think a lot of our listeners probably don't know at all anything about that. Can you explain a little bit about what cupping off means and the how the platform works moving?
Sure. Really simply, it's a rotary platform, so it's just a very big platform that's turning around. At first, at the beginning of the season, it's going quite slowly because there's a lot of milk to take from the cows. But as the season goes on and their volume decreases, the platform, you can speed it up because they don't have as much milk coming out. It's not taking as much time. So when they first come into the yard, they're lining up and they're waiting to get onto the platform. And they want to get onto the platform because there's molasses and there's grain and there's some yummy stuff that they're given that they're excited about. And so they're coming onto the platform, and then there's someone with our system. A lot of milking sheds are different, but our system, someone was cupping on, and then the other person at the other side was taking those cups off when they had finished.
Off the teats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because there's a little bit of a technique to cupping on, because quite often the cows, that's where you can see if there's mastitis, or you can see if it's got like a ruptured teat, or it's got something happening. So often people who are new don't cup on. So I began mostly just taking the cups off and then spraying them with iodine, the teats, and then they have to back off. So they find that, especially at the end of the season when the platform's going quite fast, they find that quite scary, because they're big cows getting off into a very small wet concrete area, and cows hate the wet because they can slip over quite easily. So the person who's cupping it off is fully covered because the cows are defecating a lot at that end of the platform. Sorry, I'm not sure why I was talking about that, but I think I was
your first day, and I remember you were talking about the first day. I asked you for an explanation of the platform, and that was a beautiful it really painted the picture, so thank you.
Yeah, I remember in your talk, your 5-minute talk, you specifically said something about there was another woman there. You know, and it's just there's not very many females that work in the dairy industry. There was another woman there, and when you got there, she said, "Oh, I'm really so glad you're there, because this needs more females. Because a lot of times the men yank off the sucker before they've turned the vacuum off." Yeah. Now, I have not ever had a baby, so I have never breastfed, and my non-breastfeeding boobs, that just sounds excruciatingly painful. But you're way more sensitive, right, when you are producing milk.
And getting milk 3 times a day.
Yeah. Describe what she was talking about.
I think she was just saying that males tend to just be a lot more gung-ho in the shed and a lot less sensitive to the needs of the cow. And that's not all males, but I think that had been her experience, especially for people who are in my position who are doing it part-time. They're not perhaps as invested as someone doing it full-time. They're just wanting to get the job done and get out of there and go home. So I think she was really just talking about the fact that these cows are just purely seen as machines, and the thought that they would find that painful to a very sensitive area of theirs, which is blowing up because they're producing so much milk and they're only being milked perhaps at the end of the season once a day. And as a breastfeeding mum myself, that's awful to think about, because you should be just naturally breastfeeding through the day as your baby needs it. So the thought that they were only getting that relief once a day makes me so sad. I remember cows coming into the shed whose teats were just like rupturing with milk, just spraying out of them because they were so full and they were so desperate for relief. Because some cows produce so much. Some don't appear to us produce as much, but some cows have the most enormous udders. So I think she was really just talking about the fact that they become so desensitized to the fact that these are living, breathing, sentient beings, and they're just viewed as machines. And so a lot of workers sometimes are just thinking about getting through the day as fast as they can, pulling off the cups without releasing the vacuum valve just to make their job faster. And especially if you are in the shed for perhaps 2 milkings a day, so that could be anywhere from, perhaps if the milking's about 2.5 to 3.5 hours, you could be in that shed for like 6-7 hours a day, just routinely cupping on, cupping off. That's a very boring job, and it's very easy to sort of switch out of thinking about what you're actually doing and just become machine-like yourself. So I think that's what she was talking about, just forgetting that these are actually animals that you're working with.
I just a technical question came up. How long is each cow on being milked? How long does it take to milk a cow with these machines?
It's different because each cow, of course, is individual, and they individually produce different amounts of milk. Some cows you need to send around the platform twice because they're producing so much milk. But perhaps in the beginning of the season, we were on a 45 bale rotary, so that's 45 cows at a time. And that platform could take maybe 20 minutes to rotate, do one rotation.
So
but to be honest, it's very varied. No, 20 minutes they could be on there getting their milk taken out.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, each cow could take up to 20 minutes. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But they're all so individual, and depending on the time of the year, the sort of the feed, it's really hard to give anyone a set figure for that because it just changes all the time.
Sure. But that gives me some, I mean, like I said, I just said, under a minute, and you said, no, 20. Yeah. So I know that I was pretty far off. You gave me.
Yeah, and something that people often, and I didn't think about, is that they're actually standing in the yard. Say you're a cow that's quite low in the hierarchy and you're getting milked last, you're standing in the yard for that entire perhaps 2-3 hours. So that's standing on concrete, fully pregnant, no food, no water, just lining up, squished in with all the other cows, and either the pouring rain or the bright sun that's burning you, no shelter. And you could be doing that for maybe, if you're doing perhaps 2 milkings a day, that could be 6 hours a day that cow is standing in the yard waiting for her turn to go onto the platform. And they're just getting more and more pregnant through the season.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just, as a woman who's been pregnant twice, I just think back to those sorts of things, and it's hard to believe that it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize, I know I didn't. I know. We're going to make it through this interview. I don't know if we are.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. We have to hear this. It's something about cows that just, people think they're just these big, dumb animals, but I've been close to them and they just warm my heart.
They have this unbelievable sense of being that is not like human. That's why there's so many religions that think of them as gods. They really, I feel like they're in this whole sphere of way above us, that they have this wiseness and this intellect and this calm that human beings could never even have an idea of what that feels like. But what you were saying was they're pregnant being milked. And I don't think many people think of that at all. You just think they're pregnant, then they give birth, and then they are milked for however long. But in the industry, and I'll let you speak to it, how quickly do they impregnate them again after they're being born so that they're pregnant and milking from the previous baby?
Very quickly. The minute calving season is about 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the farm, and then they will go straight into AI season. So a cow carries her baby for 9 months, just like a human. So if you're talking it's a year-long process, then within 3 months of them giving birth, are they looking to get them impregnated again?
So AI is artificial insemination?
Yeah.
And calving, when you say calving season, is that the moment that the calf comes into the world and to the moment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the calving season in New Zealand, like globally, it's different. So it's probably quite different in the States. You guys probably stagger it. But in New Zealand, and I'm not even sure why, but it's done in a very intense process in about 8 to 12 weeks. It does depend on how efficient the farm is. So in New Zealand, in that, say, 8 to 12 weeks, we are slaughtering between 1.7 and 2 million newborn babies in that calving season. So you can imagine how busy the slaughterhouse is, how busy the slaughterhouse trucks is. It just becomes this incredibly frantic time of year in New Zealand. You imagine, I'm sorry to upset you, but all the procedures and processes that need to happen to slaughter up to 2 million babies in 8 weeks, to slaughter and process them.
I think that people don't realize that the byproduct of getting their glass of milk is you have to make these babies who often don't have a place in the world, and so they are basically slaughtered for veal. They're turned into dairy cows like their mothers, but if they're male, or a lot of females too, will just get slaughtered for meal or for veal or animal food.
In New Zealand, they're processed for blood plasma. That's a really big thing for science. Small amount for cosmetics. Their hides, and I think those are the two big industries in New Zealand. We don't tend to do a lot of veal. We do a very small amount that's sent to, I think it's sent to Europe, but it's nothing like the systems in the States where you have the babies in those veal tiny little enclosures. Yeah, we don't have that in New Zealand.
We actually, the veal, in California, you're not allowed to breed calves for veal or raise them for veal, but
right.
But the calf hutches that dairy calves are put in are almost as small as veal hutches, especially in California where they're wooden. There are these incredible things called calf ranches where they take the calves from the mothers within a day and put them in these systems, these factories that have thousands of babies. And they just basically, they're in boxes. And that's how we in America treat them. When I see photos of New Zealand farms, I do see green grass with and in the dairies, and we don't really have that in America that much. Our cows are on in feedlots.
Yeah, and we have feedlots here too. In fact, I live not far from one that has potentially up to 10,000 cows at any point.
Wow.
That's something a lot of New Zealanders don't know, but that's less than probably about half an hour from my house. And in New Zealand too, we try and sell to the world this idea that our cows are grass fed and they're happy and they're roaming and they have these natural behaviours. But in reality, that grass is it's incredibly managed just to make sure there's enough food throughout the year for them. So we do this thing called strip grazing. So it may look like they're in a big paddock, but they will be stripped grazed down into quite small areas of that paddock through a lot of the year. And you've got to remember too, those paddocks are covered in the cow's excrement, the cow's urine, fertilizers. That's not grass that if I was a cow that I would be wanting to eat, standing in all the defecation of my sisters, trying to find something fresh to eat in that. So it can look attractive or natural, but any dairy farmer worker knows that it's actually far from that. Although we do try and spin this to the world that's the life of our cows, and it's really not. And we do have a lot of cows being raised in barns in New Zealand now too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So go back to you're in month 5, and then it's calving season. So here we go. And you don't really know anything about what's getting ready to unfold in front of you. I'm assuming you had a lot of preconceived ideas, like we all did, of just it's all fine. So what happens, and what was the most surprising element to it for you, having, come to this job thinking it's going to be idyllic and that it's also beautiful for humans and the cows, the whole process?
I think so. The first day I turned up to the calf pens, calving season must have been going for about a week or so to have enough calves at that point that they needed a worker. And at that point, I was still feeling quite positive about the whole experience, and I just thought, great, I'm going to be stuck into this 3 months of really intense work, and I'm going to get fit and strong and make a bit of cash. And I just remember standing in the calf pen my first morning and the realization that these were babies. These were tiny, broken, cold, crying babies. And it was the first time I really realized what I had to do to get that milk earlier that I'd been so proud of getting. And I never really, as I'd said, I'd never really been an animal lover. I'd had a dog growing up who I loved, but I'd never really had a great affinity with the animal kingdom. But just the shock, and I wasn't even a mother yet at that point, but the shock of the realization that these were babies. I turned up to basically an orphanage of newborn babies. And I just remember I think I was actually probably in shock for the first couple of weeks. I did a bit of crying behind the scenes, but you definitely, at that point, like, I didn't want any of the other workers to know that I was upset by it. I don't even think I said anything to my partner because I was just taking time to process it myself. And these were tiny babies that you have to teach how to feed. They don't know that milk comes from this rubber teat that's hanging off a calf feeder off the fence. They're looking for their mums. So that's why they spend a lot of time nuzzling each other's navels, trying to drink off each other's navels, because they're programmed to look for a warm teat. So what they can end up doing is really infecting each other's navels, which affects their growth. So farmers don't like that, so they put the little rings on their noses so they won't do it. And I mean, they're just tiny babies that you have to get between your legs because they're strong, like they're newborns, but they're really strong. And also at the beginning of the season, you're so weak. And like I'd only been in retail and hospitality before that. I had no body strength, and I had to get them between my thighs and wrestle these very strong little frantic, panicking babies up to the calf feeder to teach them. You have to put your hands around their muzzle, and squeeze their muzzle so that they start making a suction, like a sucking on the teat, to realize that's where this cold, bloody milk is coming from.
It sounds so aggressive. It sounds like an aggressive,
It's extremely aggressive. I once had a man say, "Oh, just give them a good smack because it's the only thing they respond to." And like, that's the mentality, is that they're naughty little calves that don't know what to do. And you have to manhandle them to make them do what they're supposed to do, because they're supposed to grow up and get strong and
so we can kill them
and make money for you, or just kill them at 4 days.
I want to ask about, because I think one concept people don't understand is in America, at least, and tell me if it's true with New Zealand, they remove the calves immediately from the mothers. And it's an economic decision, although they will tell you it's to keep them healthier, which doesn't make sense to me at all, but it's an excuse. And it might be because a lot of times the calving area is so dirty, but they'll give you all these. I had one farmer tell me it was because the cows aren't good mothers. And we don't want them to bond. And then I thought, well, yeah, that's the reason you don't want them to bond. But what's the economic reason for taking a calf away? Because the calf needs milk. So why not just give that calf mother's milk?
So I just, before I get into the economic reason, I do want to just follow on from that point about what that farmer said, because this is one that makes me the most angry, because it's just victimizing the victim when they say that cows are not good mothers. We are talking about generations of cows that have never known the love of a mother, and they are still good mothers if you let them be. And I watched them in that short period that they had with their babies be good mothers. And if you want to see it, sorry, I'm getting upset, but if you want to see a cow be a bad mother, it's because she's under extreme duress. She has potentially limited food in the small maternity area. A cow would naturally go off and birth by itself. All her instincts are telling her to leave the herd, get away somewhere safe, and hide that baby for a few days. She's deprived of all of that. She has to birth right beside another mother because the maternity paddocks are quite small, just for ease of catching the babies. And she has to birth muddy, horrible conditions where she cannot hide that baby. Naturally, what they would do is then after a couple of days when that baby's a bit stronger and bigger, she would bring the baby back to meet the herd. But she is deprived of all of that. And she has also potentially gone through years of knowing the minute she births, that baby is being taken from her. So for those farmers to say that they are not good mothers makes me incredibly angry, because I think, how dare you? With everything you've done to her, she still shows time and again what a good, dedicated, loving mother she wants to be. And it frustrates me no end to hear those sorts of fallacies. When reality is, it's the way the farm is set up that can make her so stressed that she may want to harm that baby. And it's to blame her, just to me, is just the icing on the cake of the cruelty of this industry.
And it's not just, by the way, the dairy industry, because they say that same thing about mother pigs, which is their excuse of why they put the mother pigs in the gestation crates, so that she can't move. Anyway, sorry to digress. Jessica, so the economic reason why they might take away the baby right away so the baby doesn't get any of the mother's milk?
Yeah, so the baby will get potentially a small amount, but that's just a tiny bit of colostrum. Now, the colostrum cannot be sold. So that mother is producing colostrum for the first 3-4 days, up to maybe a week, but for the first 3 or 4 days. So that colostrum milk, she's put into a colostrum herd, not the main milking herd yet. And that colostrum is taken, put into massive barrels. And often she's got mastitis and things like that happening already because she doesn't doesn't have a baby drinking off her like she should be, which should be just getting her whole body gearing up. So she's already running into problems like that. And those colostrum barrels, that's what's used to feed the calves. So they would never feed, well, in New Zealand, I've never seen them feed the calves milk that they can sell. So they feed them cold, often bloodied colostrum milk from that colostrum herd. So that's the economic reason behind it. They just want to keep that colostrum milk separate and use that to feed to the babies. In New Zealand, you're told a lot that it's just to do with disrupting the bonding process. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, what a wicked thing to even have policy around trying to disrupt a mother's bonding process with her newborn.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's just, yeah.
I want to go to the mothers, but I wanted to just share a really quick story that Dr. Milton Mills told me. And it was about a friend of his who was spending some time at a dairy farm doing some just observational research. And there was a particular cow that the farmer who had just given birth, and the farmer was having a lot of trouble with her because she just wasn't producing milk. So she had given birth overnight, and then the next morning she was near the barn with the baby, and they took the baby away from her, as had happened to her many, many, many times. And she goes in the milking barn, and she's just not producing milk. And they're trying to figure out what's wrong with her. And anyway, long story short, she had given birth to twins. She was hiding the other one. So any argument, so she was walking out into the field every day and feeding the one that she had hidden. So any argument that they are not good mothers and not smart as hell, because can you imagine even having to make that selection, first of all, between which one? But she knew one was going to get taken because they knew she was pregnant. So she was hiding the other one. So the mothers, Jessica, you've given us a really good picture and understanding of the babies. What are the mothers doing after they give birth 24, 48 hours later? What is their experience?
So once that baby's taken, each farm would be different, but on our farm, the babies were taken. My partner or whoever was on that day would come with a tractor and a trailer and take the babies from the mum and then take them to the pens. The pens are quite close to the calving, to the milking shed, because the mothers follow those trailers desperate to get their babies back. And they want the mothers to think that you need to come back to the milking shed every day because there's potential that your baby will be there. God. So that's why they have the calving pens so close to the milking shed. So I would see cows that would walk past and call because they could see the babies and they could hear the babies, but they were never going to be touching those babies. So the mother initially goes into quite a smaller colostrum herd where her colostrum's taken, and just getting back to what that farmer or the person who visited that farm was saying, it's very normal for a cow not to instantly start producing milk. Just like humans, it can take a day or two for that milk just to come in. But in the farming industry, they employ some pretty horrible practices if that mother's not instantly making milk. And luckily on our farm, they would just inject them. I can't remember what the medicine was, but it was to speed up the milk coming in process. But I know of very awful things like putting hoses and stuff up into the mum's reproductive system and blasting them with water, because apparently that instantly can start them lactating. So there's quite a few horrible practices that I think a lot of these are illegal now, but who knows what goes on in farms because there's no one there really watching. So it is very normal for a cow not to just instantly, the minute she's in the shed, start producing milk. Exactly like humans, they're also individual. Some will be producing before the baby is born. Some it will still take a day or two. Yeah. Sorry, so what was the question, Dotsie?
Just the experience of the mom, but you did a good job of explaining kind of what they go through. Do some of them, like you said, they're all uniquely, individually their own person. So do some of them... I guess I just have always imagined that they must go into almost a shock. And then they just, because as we were talking about before this episode, Alexandra, the dairy industry, the perfect example is The Handmaid's Tale. If anybody hasn't seen The Handmaid's Tale, please watch one episode, and that is
or read the book. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know there was a book.
Yeah.
It's based off of a
book by Margaret Atwood. But the series is great too. But if you don't have access to it, the book is really good too.
Yeah. I guess I kind of imagine that some of the cows would do like some of the women in Handmaid's Tale, where you almost go into such a state of shock that you're almost zombified over the period of the 4 or 5 years that you're a mother cow on a dairy farm. What is that? Yeah. Do you think some of them must do that, right? You have to be able to figure out how to detach, or you would just die of sorrow and pain and sadness.
And there is a lot of research coming out now around postnatal depression in cows, because of course they're experiencing some incredibly intense things. And if you're a new cow, you're giving birth, things that are so new to you, the experience must be just unbelievable. But yeah, I definitely believe they must shut down, because they are incredibly clever. They're very, very interested in what's going on around them, and they're just kept in these very boring square paddocks. They're very inquisitive creatures. So to have that kind of trauma happen to them, I absolutely believe they must be going through some, and with just depression, much as I imagine a human would. And as I said, this has come out since we left the farm, but there is a lot of research coming out now about postnatal depression in cows. Yeah.
So I hear a lot of farmers, I mean, when I read things on farms trying to understand, a lot of the farmers say, we love our cows, we love our animals. I believe they think that, don't they? Or do they? What makes them different than the three of us who have a completely different perspective on exactly the same thing?
I have thought about this so much, because that was my community for 4 years. That my family still work in the dairy industry, and they still believe that they love their animals. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. But I think they're just operating on a level, this is my theory, I don't know what the truth is, but they're operating on a level that is very pragmatic to themselves around profit, needing to live their lives, make profit, tell themselves that it's necessary what they're doing because they're feeding the world. And so when they talk about loving their animals, I think they're just talking about it from quite a superficial level. I've seen, like, the owner of the farm we were on cry because 2 cows had died of bloat in the paddock, and yet we'll load up 40 pregnant cows to go to the slaughterhouse and not think anything of it. And he would still tell you he loves his animals. I think I don't know, you can edit this out if you like. I just think it's those of us that are strong enough, emotionally strong enough to dive deeper and to see it from a more holistic, deeper level within ourselves than just those superficial, I still need to make a living, I still need to be detached to a certain point, but tell myself I'm a good person and I love these cows. I even saw my partner go through this, because he, for 3.5 years, had me in his ear about going vegan. You've got to go vegan, because I went vegan my first day in the calf sheds, even though I didn't even know what vegan meant. But I just knew that if I went this vegan, that I wouldn't be, it's ridiculous now, but I wouldn't be contributing to what I was seeing, even though I was working in the industry. So I myself had a lot of cognitive dissonance around my own actions in the industry, but I was telling myself, I've gone vegan, so I'm okay. I've gone vegan, I've done something. I mean, I'm still thoroughly profiting from all of this, but I've gone vegan, so I'm okay. But I was still in his ear the whole time, and he couldn't go vegan until the day we left the farm. And the day we left the farm, he said, I'll go vegan. But he couldn't go vegan until that very point of the final time he left the farm. And I think people self-protect. And so that's what these farmers are doing. They're saying they love their animals, but they're really just self-protecting their need to make a living. And I think that's why we can't get through to them. And it's only there's a few super strong individuals that are like, damn, this isn't okay, and I am going to change this. And I know that sounds like I'm building myself up, because I did see it and I did leave, but it still took me 4 years to get there. And people ask, why did you saw it that first day in the calf pens, why did you stay another 4 years? And I don't have an answer for that, other than the fact that I think I was self-protecting. Well, and I was telling myself, I've gone vegan, so that's enough.
You connected with a former slaughterhouse worker who turned animal advocate via a local Facebook group. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And he kind of gave her those words of encouragement to quit. Can you tell us what he said and tell us about that experience?
Gosh, it's funny because I've actually gone on now since we left the farm to be quite good friends with him. But he doesn't even remember me first reaching out to him. But yeah, and I should go back and read what that message was, because I'd never been on social media till I was 37. And I only went on social media to find animal rights activists. So I didn't even really know what vegan meant. I just had this very vague sort of concept in my head. I can't remember what he said to me exactly, but I know it was enough when I was in that really deep depression to galvanize me and think, you know what, I can do something, I can fight, and I can do something for these victims. And that's actually what saved my life, because I felt so distraught with guilt and grief about what I had done in those 4 years, that him giving me the knowledge that there were other animal rights activists and you can fight and there is something positive you can take away from this, totally galvanized me at that point. And I think I almost sat up in bed and was like, right, that's enough. It's time to fight. And that's when I was like, we're leaving. And I'm to my partner, I'm leaving with or without you. And that's when he was like, holy shit, okay. So, and then that's when I think he really took it on board. She means business. But it took him a minute. He held like a bit of a vegan intervention for me at that point.
Right.
Because he was so concerned about my mental health, and he was in the middle of calving season. So he didn't have time to have a woman at home with a small baby losing her mind with grief. He just needed me to just sort it out and get on with it. But I think when I said we're going, and, you know, I've now got to fight this industry that I've been so complicit in, that's when he went, whoa, okay, right, okay, let's sort this out. And he really was truthful with himself about how spiritually and physically exhausted he was in the industry, because you do so much of just getting up at 4:30 and just getting through the day and trying not to think too deeply about anything, because you're literally just trying to survive each day. And these are massive crises that are happening on the farm, like calves and birthing, like complications, down cows, all sorts of things that are happening, but you are just getting through that day by gritting your teeth. So there's not a lot of thought around any sort of emotional or you're not really thinking too deeply about things.
You can't
really
connect
yourself. Yeah. No, you certainly can't connect. And I think that's why he said he couldn't go vegan until the day he left the farm. And he did, and he has been.
You had a baby during this time. Was being a mother the thing that galvanized you more
100%.
to actually leave and
100%.
Actually see what's going on?
Yeah, it was when I held that little man in my arms and I was feeding him, and then looking out the window to see the mothers that were trying to feed their babies, but instead were having them taken from them. And I could see how much this tiny baby needed me, and I was everything to him. And I could see the exploitation outside my window because the maternity paddock was right beside where we lived. And I'm embarrassed to say it took for me to experience it personally, parenthood, to get it. Like, I'm so in awe of people like you guys who just, or Dotsie, you just got it. You didn't need to be a parent to understand how wrong it was, but I think I did for whatever reason. And
okay.
yeah, I'm embarrassed to say it took for me to personally go through it to really understand it.
I think we all have
I
our
wish I-
regrets, right?
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
it
gosh,
took me
yeah.
33 years to go from vegetarian to vegan, and I feel like that's my biggest regret in life,
Yeah.
to have taken so long,
Yeah.
you know, to
Yeah.
continue participating. So we all have different journeys. But now you're an activist, and you said you wanted to make up for the 4 years that you were working on this farm, you felt that you were complicit in the cruelty. Tell us about your
100%.
activism.
Well, I didn't even really know where to start, to be honest. I just got on social media and found that there were animal rights activists. I'd never even heard of this concept. And it was really by just going along to meetings and going along to a few vigils that things started to cement in my mind around where this needs to go. And then, I just really got into my activism, and we had held a disruption on a dairy, a local dairy farm's open day. And then I got pregnant with my second child. And unfortunately, I'm very sick when I'm pregnant. So that was another year and a half out where I didn't really do any activism. But I've just got back into it now that my little man's sort of old enough to be without me for a few hours. And so I think that's when someone said to me, you should bring Mothers Against Dairy to New Zealand. And I realized that in the few years that I've been away from the farm, I've had so many workers come to me, people who are still working in the industry, and talk about how upset they are by what they're seeing. And there was one woman in Tasmania, I'll never forget this, and she said every time she drives to the dairy shed, she wants to drive into a tree because she just feels so distressed by what she's doing. But she stays there because there's no work locally, and she's a single mum, and she also stays because she's so scared if she leaves, who's going to come in behind her and how they're going to treat the animals. And I think that is a very real fear for workers, that it, as awful as it is, if I leave, it could potentially be worse. And so I'd had enough workers in the industry and workers who had left, but often people who don't want to talk out because it's still their community, it's still their family. Some of them grew up on dairy farms. I guess I was just lucky in a way that I just felt so much conviction that I didn't care that I was leaving half of my family on that farm, because we farmed with family members. And for me, leaving the community was okay. I hadn't grown up there. I didn't have the script around me being a dairy farmer for life. There were some things that made it easy for me when we walked away to really walk away and join the other side effectively. So in a way, I'm probably seen as a bit of a threat to the industry because I was once one of them, and now I will be seen as such a traitor. And if anything, that just spurs me on to want to make noise. And that's why I felt Mothers Against Dairy meant that there was going to be like a cohesive voice for all these people who are angry about dairy, because there's so many of us, but we sort of don't know how to vent that voice. And I felt that there was this amazing movement in the States that Ashley had created and started with Mothers Against Dairy. And it just gave us an umbrella to join under. And know that we were all simpatico in these views. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No,
you're
not.
not.
That's great.
I'm a
You
big
actually,
Ashley Capps fan.
Haven't you raised some money for billboards? 3 or 4 billboards. I'm curious what is on those billboards. How are you?
The first one, so this is when I just left the farm, and it said that 2 million babies are slaughtered every year in New Zealand, and that was about just what we call bobby calves here. Those are the babies that are slaughtered at 4 days old, and that was just a billboard around that reality. And then the last billboard I've just been working to get up, it was a billboard designed by a friend of mine in Wellington, and that one said, if you believe it's wrong to hurt animals, you're already vegan. Or it was something along those lines anyway. It was just quite a succinct with the picture of a pig in one of the gestation crates. And then I've been talking about getting a Mothers Against Dairy billboard up as well, because I really like billboards. I feel like they're quite a good way to reach a large number of people and get it in people's psyche. without being confrontational, but just something that someone might drive past every day and let sink in. Maybe they won't go vegan from that billboard, but there's good potential that has triggered something in them, so that when something else more perhaps in your face or cohesive comes down the road, they're way more open to the idea.
I'd love to end on a quote that I read of yours that said, I might have been too soft for farming, but that says more about farming than it does about me. Can you extrapolate on what you meant by that?
Well, a lot of time, because the dairy industry can't really discredit me because I was boots on the ground doing the job, so they just try and discredit my emotional reaction. And they try and throw at me that I'm just the over-emotional woman who couldn't handle it. And quite often people say to me, you just must have been on one of those bad farms. There's lots of great farms, but there are a couple of bad apples.
Oh.
And so I think that's what that quote was saying, was that if you want to discredit my emotional reaction, how can I say this? But that my emotional reaction is not the issue here. The issue here is what I was responding to, and the fact that not enough people are seeing it for what it is. And I think that that's to do with the abuse of humans in the dairy industry, because in New Zealand especially, we're bringing in a lot of migrants because New Zealanders don't want to do the work. We're effectively exploiting a really bad situation in another country to bring them here, to make them do really hard, really lowly paid, really soul-destroying work. And so... I'm not sure.
They're blaming the victim again, just like you talked about how when they say, the cows are not good mothers, they're not looking at the system and taking responsibility for this horrible system, right?
And that is it.
Well said.
People like to think that the abuse is the kicking of a calf or the breaking of a tail, but it's actually the system that is the abuser. Like it's the system in its entirety that is what's so wrong. To me, the kicking or dragging of a calf for a few seconds is nothing compared to the crime of removing a newborn from its mum. Mm-hmm. To me, that is the true crime. Sure, that other stuff is awful and no one wants it to happen, but the true crime is the system itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's such a good point. You did not speak of any time in this interview about beatings, electrocution, anal electrocutions to get them to move, anal electricity, I guess I should say, rape racks. You didn't give any horror except for just the reality of what happens on every single dairy farm if they're going to be profitable.
Because I think those horrors, even though they are horrors, are just not detractions, but they are the industry does want to pick up on these things because they can use it to their advantage to say, okay, well, we'll just stamp down on that then. We'll just make sure those calves have a ramp to go to the slaughterhouse, to get onto the truck. They kind of want these little things to talk about and for the public to want to really isolate and get down on, because then they can come up with a solution. Yeah. But the reality is it's the whole industry that needs to stop. And it's the whole industry that is so cruel. So, I tend to not get sidetracked by the throwing of a calf or the pulling of a calf's leg or abuse that happens to cows in the dairy sheds. Because, of course, I'm a vegan animal rights activist. Those things horrify me, but nowhere near as the gargantuan crimes that are happening with just the taking of this milk that was designed for little babies. That's the true crime.
And not even ever asking the mother if she would like to have a baby or not. We didn't even go into that.
Yeah, we didn't go into the rape of the mothers, but we will at some other time. Jessica, thank you so much for being on the show. We will definitely have you back.
Yeah.
We'd like to talk to you again.
I'm amazed.
We made it through, girl. The three of us are still here. I go home, cry tonight. But that was really illuminating. For us, there were things I learned that I didn't
Yeah,
know,
a
right?
lot.
And so it's definitely going to be for listeners that are just starting this journey.
Yeah, your
So thank
power
you.
is actually that which you felt so ashamed of, which is your knowledge, your inside knowledge of the dairy industry. That's where you're going to be so powerful in the animal rights movement.
To be honest, it's the only thing that keeps me going is the thought that I was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Because my impact on the other side is greater than what I did in those 4 years by profiting from it, from profiting by the abuse. It's the only thing that really gets me up in the morning is the fact that the other side of this, I have got so much work to do.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.